Okay, good morning. So we're up to Shin Yud Ches Seif Dalet. It's quite a long Seif, so we'll probably split it in half. Do some today, some tomorrow. So says the Mechaber, Tavshil Shin is Bashel Kol. You've got a tavshil, some food which has been cooked Kol Tzarchei fully. Yesh Be Mishum Bishul Im Nitzdanen. If it is now cooled down, then there is a problem of cooking it further. Says the Ramah, but only if it's improving it. If it's mitztamek v'yofele, is there a problem of bishul at this stage? Says the Mishnah Berurah. Let's do the Mishnah Berurah till there. Siv Kotzen Chof Beis. Yesh by v'chol dinim hasur mishum bishul. Afilu litin al akira el tanur kodim hesek osa. If you can't cook it, if there's a problem of bishul, even putting it on or near an oven before the oven is turned on would be asa. Kamosha Kosav Siman Reish and Gimel, like we said back in Reish and Gimel. Bishul. So we said that if it's a tavshil shenish bashel called tzarchei, then yesh by mishum bishul im nitzdanein. Says the Mishnah Berurah Valkein also min atayr laniach hatavshil hazeh b'Shabbos b'makom cham shayatz aledusbay. You can't leave it in a warm place which is yatz aledusbay, which is hot enough that your hand retracts from it. However, to mix it into a pot which is hot, which is in a klisheni, that would be allowed. However, if this cooked item is now cooled down, what does that mean? That it's now, although it was previously cooked, but now it's cold. I.e., it may be a little bit warm, but it's not yatzaledis by. Avalim hayatzaledis by, but if it were to be yatzaledis by, af shenitzdan mirsichasei, even though it's cooled down from it's not like piping hot, it's not in a reseach, lo shaykh by bishul oid. If it's still yatzaledis by, then we're not concerned of any further cooking. Techlal de bechlal reseach hu de'ein bishlach habishul. Because if it's still yatzaledis, then we apply the normal rule of ein bishlach habishul. V'dafkin in lachzir letanu, and specifically referring to returning it, chazara, returning it to an oven, k'shel garuf min hagecholim oishei mamumin, where there's no shaila of garuf hakotim, i.e. all the coals have been taken out or it's cleared out. Aval letanu k'she'ein garuf. But an oven that have got coals in it hasn't been cleared out. For kolchkin al eish mamash, and certainly on the fire itself, also lahachzi lekula alma afilu reseach gomer. You can never put even a boiling hot, fully cooked item back on the fire itself. Because that's mechzek mavashel. Even though you're not actually cooking something, putting it back on a fire is never allowed. V'chol zeh udas hamachaber. Aval haramah lekama b'sif tesvov ba'agah kosav. So that's an important point. The Ramah is of the opinion that we say ein bishlach habishul unless the item has fully cooled down. It's done in legamrei. But here it's yatzaledis, so therefore according to the Ramah it would be okay.
That's how you pass it.
Yeah. That's why it sounds a bit surprising.
So if I take something out of the oven on Shabbos and it's still hot, let's say, I don't know, whatever it's hot, I can take, let's say, soup and take some off and put it back in the oven.
No. No, because that's what he's saying. You can never put back in an oven on Shabbos, because then that's a problem of mechzek mavashel. The onlooker will say, "Hey, why is Shali using an oven on Shabbos?" So if
it's still boiling hot,
so what can you do? You're saying, so
where can you put that? I thought you said somewhere we can.
So he's saying not back in the oven or near a pot or something like that. Even though it's but never back in the oven because of mechzek mavashel. Yeah. Okay, v'yofalei. So the Ramah says v'yeshayim dafkim mitztamik v'yofalei. Says the Mishnah Berurah in the Chofhei, avol mitztamik v'ralei. But if it's going to deteriorate, mutal aniach samach lemiduri, then you can put it close to the fire. Afil makom she'atzaledis by. That's what we're talking about. Yeah. V'ayin bebach she'posuk kasvar rishoyin de'ein chiluk. Okay, good. Now, weiter. I'm on the second line of the Mechaber. If it has not cooked fully, and even though it's sort of partially cooked, because it's not nispashal kartzarke, and therefore it's shaykh bishul, even if it's still very, very hot. Imagine you've got the chicken in the oven, and it's not, it's Michael ben Drusai, it's not this special kartach. It can be boiling hot, but it's not cooked properly. So then, in that situation, you've got a problem with bishul. When do you have that problem? When you've got, let's just do the remote, the Mishnah Berurah till there. So Mishnah Berurah Chav Vav and Chav Zayin. K'maychel ben Drusai v'hu adin yoser ad she'yigame bishula. And so too, any further cooking. What is mavushal kartzah? Okay, so if you look at the footnote 40, he says Bia Hagan ben Yashav that shehu k'shestam adam oichel oisei kach shelo b'shas hatchak. Mavushal kartzah means that the regular person would eat it at that stage. Not when it's in a difficult situation. Just it's good to go. Sheyesh b'bishul min haTorah, shaykh b'bishul min haTorah. Va'afilu by the resech u'pashut da'afilu alidei ein Yehudi also ligmar bishul. Even through a non-Jewish person, you can't complete the bishul. V'nir b'diavad ein leser hatavshil, and therefore it seems that b'diavad you don't ask the tavshil. Yesh lismich ala poiskim shesovrim. The kivish is special. K'maychel ben Drusai shuv ein ba mishum bishul. But once it's cooked, to that point of Michael ben Drusai, then ein bozeh mishum bishul. We're no longer worried about bishul. Now back to the mechaber. We're 1, 2, 3 lines before the bottom. V'hani mili sheyesh be bishul acha bishul. That's true. Sheyesh be bishul acha bishul. Betavshel sheyesh be mark, when there's some liquid in it. Avodav is bashel kvar, but something which has been cooked and it's dry. V'hu yovesh mutar lishrosa b'chamin b'shabbos. You're allowed to keep it in something hot, in a hot on Shabbos. So says the Mishnah Berurah, V'hani mili. When is this true? V'hani mili rotzalema hodor in the mistanen, when it's cooled down. Shaykh be bishul b'chol gavna. That's when you put it in morok. Says Rashi, says Mishnah Berurah, b'davalach kimin she'ozer chamusa v'nistanen, because in a liquid, once the heat has gone out, it's cooled down. Bottle mimenu shem bittul harishon. Then the original cooking is no longer called mavushal anymore. Avul davar hanushim in nispashal kartzach. But if it's solid and it's nispashal kartzach, it was fully cooked. Shenispashal kvar davka shenispashal avuloi nispashal in nishmer of Shabbos b'kli rishon shayat zeledis boy also l'shroisa b'chamin shayat zeledis boy. But if it's fully cooked, then we're not worried. Then mutzah l'shroisa b'chamin. For example, you've got a schnitzel. And then you want to put it in hot water, not ala eish, and not in a klirishin or something like that, but just in warm water, in soup. You got a bowl of soup and you want to put your schnitzel in soup, for example. So it's fully cooked, so then you haven't got a problem, right? But and the nishmer of Shabbos b'klirishin. But if this schnitzel wasn't properly cooked, but it was nishra be'er Shabbos b'klirishin she'at zeledis boy, it was sort of floating in a klirishin, which was she'at zeledis boy, but it's not in the special kartzach. Then also the shroisa b'chamin she'at zeledis boy b'Shabbos. Then you can't put it in hot food on Shabbos. The afagav the ein kanto seves bishul. It might not be extra cooking. The kol mokum kol zman is bal mamish. But so long as it wasn't properly cooked, but it was just in a klirishin, it tastes like ksas bishul k'shemich pam sheni b'chamin. When you put it a second time in a hot liquid, then it's going to be some extra dimension of cooking it, so you won't be allowed to do it. V'yesh makinin b'dova. V'dasa prima godim da makinin mari b'dova shedarka v'tive kal lihigama b'shulei af b'klirishin. When do we say it's also when it's very likely or easy to cook? Even in a klirishin shehusim and aish that has been removed from the fire. Avadov she'en dark is special legamri b'klirishin, but something which is not going to properly cook in a klirishin. Lukula ama also because it hasn't been cooked now. V'toiv lahachmin b'chol gabnus. If you got some schnitzel and it wasn't cooked properly and it was sort of heated, it was some meat, let's say, it was put in the soup and it wasn't properly cooked. For you to now put it in a warm water, in yataledes by soup, for example, that would not be allowed. All of this is talking about in a klirishin. If your meat was cooked and it wasn't cooked properly, but it was just left in a klirishin, to put in a klisheni, that would allow, but not in a klirishin. Now, okay, let's do the next bit quickly. Bottom line. If you've got a solid item which is not properly cooked before Shabbos, Ein sherin oso b'cham Shabbos. You can't keep it in hot water on Shabbos or hot liquids on Shabbos. Aval madichin oso b'cham Shabbos. You can rinse it. You can pour chamin over it because it's not going to cook properly. Chutz, apart from some things which are kalei habishul, for example, chutz min ha-meliach hayoshen or min dag shenikra kulis haspanin. Apart from these types of fish which cook very very easily, she'enim tzrichim bishul ela ma'at. You just need a little bit of bishul for them, and merely rinsing them with warm water, that's going to cook them. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Katan Lamed Beis v'hu yavish rotzolema she'eriku hamorak mimenu. So it's dry. You've taken off any liquid from it. So any dry food which has got no liquid on it, you're allowed to soak it, even in a hot klirishin. Again, we're not on the fire. It will just soften it up. The ein bishlach habishal, because once the item is cooked, ein bishlach habishal. Avalo yitna leklirishin she'omed al gabe ha'esh. Right, but you can't put it on that because that's a gezer drabanan of mechzik and mavasha. It looks like you're cooking. So you can rinse it in warm water. Even though it's even though you don't leave it there until it fully sort of becomes very soft. Then even in the klisheni would be also the Mexican mavashav ledomil is not the same as spices, but siftes the loy also leklirishin, which is only also in a klirishin. The tavin asuin lematik hakader v'lo Mexican mavashav, because we're not worried about Mexican mavashav. Well, that's in the case of tavin. Madichin oisai b'chamin b'Shabbos. So something which is cooked, you're allowed to put it in hot water on Shabbos. V'hanu shema'ar olav meklisheni. What does that mean? That you're pouring from a klisheni onto it, but not from a klirishin. The klirishin also la'aris olav to iru klirishin and mavashal k'dei klippa, because we paskin a klirishin cooks a k'dei klippa, which means a very thin layer of the food. Commercial cost of seafood. So if it's a dova yovesh, you can put it in a klisheni, but you can't pour from a klirishin onto it because it could cook kadei klippa. This is something which is not fully cooked yet. But when can you pour from a klisheni, or when can you do all of this? That's dafka something which is properly yovish, but not something which is kalei habishul. For example, meliach hayoshan. What is that? Says the Mishnah Berurah Lamed Vav, dag maluach shel shana she'avra. It's old salted fish from last year. V'kulis ha'ispan hushem dag. It's the name of a fish. She'uchnes machmas milcha. You eat it because of its saltiness. Alidei hadochen b'chayin, just by rinsing it in warm water. V'alkein afilu hadochen nami. You can't even do that. Shezel gma melachta v'avabishul. By just pouring warm water over this fish, that is cooking it. Because you've cooked it. The nature of these things is you can't eat it really until you've done this process of rinsing it in warm water. Therefore the hadacha is considered bishul. It makes it into food. So to any other salty food. If you just pour cold water on them and that finishes them off, then there's no problem of a klisheni, because you could have done it with a klirishin. You haven't really. It's not called finish. It's not called cooking. Well, if he's a dag maluach shem kamenu nikra herring, but therefore the herring, which is which we know and love, because you could just rinse them with cold water, and even without washing them, technically you should be allowed to put some warm water over the herring to make it edible, because really it didn't even need it. However, the taz implies that it's better not. And therefore, pouring even cold water over herring nowadays, it's best to avoid it, any form of warm water, because that is considered some form of bishul, according to the taz. The Lamed Zayin, Rabbi Chaim, but Tzayin mutar adicha af l'shreisei, va'afilu davar sh'alei shriya, but Tzayin nasir l'achila. So putting in cold water would be okay. Shekol davar she'ein mutar l'asas b'shabbos k'men shekol b'simin shin chavdalet. Okay, so basically, with pouring warm water over something, generally, if it's cooked and it's dry, then there's no problem. But if it's a cold item, once it's cooled down, there's a shaila of bishul. We'll discuss this more tomorrow. And really, what we're going to see tomorrow is very important. We're going to discuss making hot drinks on Shabbos, because that's this is the relevance of this. So making hot drinks on Shabbos, and it's Hashem will be tomorrow's topic. Seder.